Isn't this peaceful and pretty? You want to learn how to do it? Okay, then let's start. Greetings and welcome to part 3 of our Flappy Clone project. What we're going to be doing today is creating that awesome visual parallax scrolling background. So the first thing we're going to do is go to opengameart.org and we are going to search for parallax background. Now, parallax is kind of a difficult word to spell. It is P-A-R-A-L-L-A-X. 2 L's inside of there. And the one we're looking for is this one right here, which says, oh, no, that's not it at all. That's like a candy background. We want this one, the 3 parallax backgrounds. If you can't find it on here, that's okay. All the assets are available to download and I've got them broken up. So you can just click on the link in the description and you'll have those all there. But the one we want is from here. It's from Mobile Game Graphics. And it has 3 different ones. We're going to use 2 of them, these 2 right here, but they have them all zipped up in one file. So we're just going to grab this right here, click Save, OK, and then we're going to open that up. Now remember, to extract it, we can be inside of the folder, and we need to click on the View Compressed Folder Tools, which my GUI is currently frozen. So we'll give it a second to wake up. There we go. Then we click Extract All. Click Extract, and we've got it all opening up here. Now there's quite a few inside of here. So we're going to go to Backgrounds, and we're going to go to Background 1. There's AI, which is Adobe Illustrator, CDR, which I don't actually know what that is, EPS, I'm not sure either, and then Parallax and PNG. So Parallax is this one right here. It's got 5 different layers. PNG just has the whole layer itself. So what we want is the parallax folder. Now it has ones for 1920 by 1080, which is a screen resolution. What that means is the width first, so 1920 pixels wide and 1080 pixels tall. Now this is the traditional HD resolution for games, movies, everything. So that's what we're going to be using. The 2048 by 1546 is more of like a 1440p resolution, which we don't need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on each of the ones that say 2048 by 1546 and just press delete. So there's one for each of the layers, and I'm just going to delete them because we don't want them and we don't want to accidentally import them into our game. So once we've got that done, we're going to go back to our game and we're going to go into our sprites folder and we're going to make a new group. So I'm going to right click, create a group, and this is going to be called backgrounds. Now we're going to have more than one background in here. So this one is the first group. Then I'm going to click on that group and I'm going to create another group inside of it. So we can have more than one group at a time. So I'm going to create another one. And this one is going to be called, we'll call it forest. So this is going to be the forest background. Then I'm going to bring this up and I'm going to drag, select all of these. And then I'm going to click on one and bring them into GameMaker. Now I'm going to drag them specifically into the forest group. It's going to take a few seconds, and then it's going to load all of them up right here. So they come in with the same name as they are named in a file, but they come in as individual sprites already set and ready for us to start working on. So what we're going to do is change the name of these sprites. So for the layer 01, we're going to change this to SPR Forest Background Sky. So it's a long name, but remember, we're going to have more than one background in here. So I want to be as specific as I can. So this is the sky. Layer 02 are the clouds. So we're going to do the same naming convention. SPR, Forest, Background, Clouds. We're going to scroll down. Number 3 is our mountains. So we're going to say SPR, Forest, Background, Mountains. Layer 04 are the trees, so SPR, Forest, background, trees. And the last one is the ground. So SPR, forest, background, ground. Now, these are not animated, so we should technically put them to 0 FPS, but because there's only one frame, GameMaker is going to understand that, and it's not even going to try to do anything, so we don't need to worry about it. We also don't need to worry about the origin, because we're going to set this as a background layer. It's not going to be a sprite. So it's going to be different, and it's not going to use the origin at all. So whatever it is, it doesn't matter. So let's go into our room. We're going to open up our room group, double click on room, and it opens it up. Now you got to double click quick because otherwise it might try to rename instead of open. So double click on that and then it's there. Now, what's really cool is the room editor in here allows us to actually start seeing and experiencing the parallax effect as we create it, which is really, really neat. The first thing we need to do is add more background layers. So over here is the background layer button. It's the first one among this whole row. And I'm going to click on this and I'm going to add 4 more backgrounds. So we want 5 backgrounds in total. Now, depending on what you had selected over here, your layers might be made in a different order. But probably what has happened is everything in your game has vanished just like you see here. So our bird is still here. We can actually see the outline of our bird, but we can't do anything. And if we play our game, it's going to be invisible as well. It's still going to work. So if we run into a spike, we will die. But as it stands right now, we can't see them. And the reason for that is our instances layer over here has gotten underneath the other backgrounds that we've added, and each of these backgrounds come in with just a black background. So each layer in our game has a depth, and that depth, you can imagine that it stacks on top of one another. And the way that GameMaker orders it is the one on top has the lowest depth. So a depth of 0, or if you go negative, brings you closer to the camera or the screen. So that's what's on top. And as you get further down, this background layer has a depth over here of 500. So that is further away from the screen. So right now, we've got 4 background layers on top of our instances, so we can't see them. So what we want to do is drag our instances layer all the way up to the top, and then it appears. Now, if you drag it on top of one of these, it might not move. So make sure that you actually drag it all the way up, and then it changes and it's not highlighting that layer. And now we can actually see our instances again, which is exactly what we want. So let's click on the bottom background and we'll scroll up on the room properties. And what we want to do is click on no sprite, click on sprites, background, forest, and now we can choose these. So I'm going to bring these up to be a larger image so we can see them a little bit better. The bottom-most background that we want is going to be the one that is furthest away in terms that make sense. So in our game, the ground is not going to be the one that's furthest away because that's the one that's actually closest to us. So the sky is the first background that we want to set. Now, when we do this, we don't actually see anything here yet. And the reason for that is all of these other backgrounds are actually still on top. But follow through with me here, and we'll have the whole parallax thing set up as soon as we set the last background, or at least all the backgrounds will be in place and in order once we set this up. So background 1, we're going to go to no sprite, sprites, backgrounds, and forest. And this one, we want the clouds. So we'll select clouds. And you can also drag and drop your sprites, which might be a little faster. So if you can bring your sprites up over here, and we're on background 2, what we're going to do is grab the mountains next, and I can just drag that right over here. GameMaker highlights that we can put it there, and there it goes. Background 3 is going to be the trees, so we'll drag that into here. And background 4 is going to be the ground. And as soon as we put this in here, everything will show up. There we go. Now, if it didn't show up for you, you probably missed one of these backgrounds. So make sure you go back through and you've got each one of them set up with a sprite and you've got them in the order that we have right here. Now you'll notice that it's kind of zoomed in. It's not the size that it's supposed to be and it doesn't look very good. We can't even actually see the ground at all because it's down here outside of what we can see inside of our room. So what we need to do is change the size of our room. Now, if you remember the numbers from before, 1920 and 1080, those are the numbers we're going to change our room size to. So we haven't talked about room size at all, so let's do a quick discussion on that. Right now, this is the room in our game. Everything that takes place in our game, because we only have one room, is happening inside of here. And there is a size to it. Now, room sizes in GameMaker are pretty much whatever you want them to be. They can be ginormous, they can be tiny. And when I say ginormous, like you can have it be in the tens of thousands of size if you want. And if you really wanted to have that big of a room, it does come with other challenges because GameMaker might struggle to run everything inside of that room all at once. Although that's more of a performance discussion and there are ways to manage and mitigate that. But needless to say, the room size that we have right now is kind of small. Now, if we run our game right now, it'll just work as expected. The background's not going to move. We haven't done that yet. It kind of looks like it might be moving, but the background itself isn't moving. So this window that we're playing our game in right here, this is not the room size. The room size can be anything you want. And currently right now, the window size is set to the same room size, so it actually looks correct. But we can have a room size that is 10,000 by 10,000, and the actual window on into our game that we're seeing right there can be the exact same size that we have right now. So that means that those two things are unrelated. There are ways to create cameras in GameMaker to show you just a small portion of your whole level, and you can have it follow the player around, but we're not going to cover that right now. I've got a lot of videos on my channel if you want to learn how to use cameras more in depth, so check those out when you're done here. But for right now, all we need to do is go down to the bottom left corner, and I'm going to bring this up a little bit, and we're going to change the room settings. So this right here is the room settings. You can see the width here is 1,366 and the height is 768. We're going to change these to 1920 by 1080. And as soon as we do that, our room opens up, and if we move it around and we press the center fit button, we can now see the ground and the entire background fits and looks really good. Now, the spikes that we have in here are completely out of place because our room size was a lot smaller, so they made sense before, but now we need to move them around. Now, we can't click on them right now because we actually have clicked on a background. So if we are on a background layer, we can't select instances. So we're going to click on the instances layer, and now we can access them. So I'm going to move them down. And you'll notice that we can actually move the spikes in front of our background. Now here it is kind of an aesthetic decision, so it's just the way it looks and it is up to you. But I think it looks a lot better to have the spikes coming out of the ground and being behind it instead of in front of it. And the way we can do that is take our instances layer and drag it down one to put it behind our background. So now we can line up our spike right here and it's hidden behind the background layer. So I'm going to go ahead and move these down. And now we should actually be able to beat this small sequence. Now you'll notice that there's like a tiny little brown line on this, and that is just a visual glitch inside of GameMaker right here. If we run our game, those don't actually exist. That just happens to line up with the grid that we have inside of here. That's all it is. So there's no brown mark inside of the game itself. Now, we have our room set up to the right size and our background put in, but it is currently not a parallax background because it's not moving. So to do that, we're going to go to the bottom background, and inside the background layer properties, we're going to click horizontal tile. This part is important. If you don't click on this button, it is not going to tile our background horizontally. So that means when we start moving our background, it will just move and then be gone forever. If we tile it, it will indefinitely scroll. Then we need to set the speed of our background. So the speed of the sky is going to start really slow. It's going to be a horizontal speed of negative 0.5. The reason for that is the sky is really far away from what we're seeing. And in real life, when you're walking, if you look at mountains and the sky, it doesn't look like they move very quickly. Well, they don't move at all, but our perspective of them shifts very slowly because they're so far away. So we're going to replicate that same idea. The most far distant objects in our parallax background will move the slowest. So the sky moves very slowly. Now we can see this one thing in action already. If we come up here to the top right, we can click this little play animation, and we can now see our bird animating, but we can also see the sky is moving. Now if we don't check this horizontal tile, it is not going to tile itself, and you can see the background is just zooming away. Well, I wouldn't call it zooming, more like crawling. It is disappearing. So make sure you've got that horizontal tile clicked, and you'll be good to go. So we're going to do that for each of these layers now. So go to background 1, horizontal tile, and we're going to bump the speed up, or I guess down technically because we're giving them negative values, but we're going to change the speed by 0.5 each time. So this one is going to be -1. You can see the clouds are now moving. Now, this parallax background does unfortunately have just the slightest visual indicator that it is being tiled, and that's just the way this parallax background works. If you want to try, you can open up the background itself. So this would be the clouds, and you could come in here and you could try to erase this. So it might be worth your time and effort, but it also might not because it takes a lot of work. If we wanted to try that, we could come in here, and what you can do is do the color picker tool, select a color, and then kind of draw on it. So it kind of erases that, which I suppose kind of looks a lot better. That's not too hard to do. You can't actually see the tool, so I'm just upgrading the size. There we go. Now it gets a lot more difficult down here. So I'll leave that up to you if you really want to try to tackle that. It's something that you could potentially do, but you can see they've got a gradient that kind of disappears into the background, and that'll be covered by a lot of other stuff. So I think getting rid of just that portion there will help it look a lot better. So that's the second one. Now let's go to backgrounds 2 and just continue the process. Horizontal tile, horizontal speed of -1.5. And there's the mountains moving. Background 3, horizontal tile, horizontal speed of -2. Now, you might think we're going to do the ground at -2.5, but you would be wrong. Remember what I said, the spikes are moving at the same speed that we're going to move the ground at, and the spikes are moving at 3.5 pixels. So the horizontal speed here will be -3.5. And we want to make sure we horizontally tile that, otherwise it will just vanish. And there we go. Now we have a beautiful parallax scrolling background, and I'm going to go ahead and run this. And as we play this, now the spikes are moving at the same speed as the background itself, and it looks really, really good. Oof, I can't play this game right now though. So that is a beautiful parallax background and how to set it up inside of GameMaker. Now we can press pause over here to stop the animation, and we might want to rename these because we're going to have to actually access them later. So I'm going to go ahead and click on one, press F2, and I'm going to rename this to Sky. Backgrounds 1, I'm going to rename to Clouds. Backgrounds 2, I'm going to rename to mountains. Background 3, I'm going to rename to trees. And background 4, I'm going to rename to ground. So now we know exactly what each one is if we ever wanted to change it, change the speed, and so on. And as we add difficulty into the game much later on in the series, we will actually change the speed of the ground and the speed of the spikes. And to do that, we need to know the name of the layer, and backgrounds underscore 4 is not a very descriptive name. So we want to make sure that we name things that make sense and are easily accessible as we are creating our game. But for now, that is all we are going to tackle. We now understand how rooms work, how to change the size, and how to make a really cool parallax background effect. I hope you enjoyed that and learned something new, and that's all we're going to cover today. In the next video, we'll talk about how to create the spike manager and get our game essentially set up and complete in the sense that we'll be able to play it indefinitely and have spikes appear forever and ever. I hope you'll join me then, and as always, keep making, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next video.